Algeria became a sovereign nation on July 5th, 1962. That day, as I walked out the door of my house, I was swept away by a human tide chanting Algérie, Algérienne, Algerian, Algeria. In the streets of my childhood, draped in green and white flags, we witnessed the birth of a nation in the heat of July and the intoxicating euphoria of freedom long lost and finally reclaimed. I was 7 years old. 62 years later, as I walked through the ancient streets of the Qasbah of Algiers with my sister and my niece, I felt an enormous sense of pride and gratitude. So we're gonna call it a wrap. The Qasbah tour is officially over. Now we're trying to find the car, so who knows? At the end of the tour, as we were leaving the Qasbah, I knew I had to tell the story of this land, the story of my birthland, the land that made us who we are. Empires have come and gone, yet the Qasbah survived, refusing to fade into the silence of long-forgotten glorious cities. The story of the Qasbah dates back to antiquity, when Amazigh tribes lived autonomously, long before any foreign power set foot on their ancestral land. Foreign presence in North Africa began when Phoenician Princess Elisa fled Tyre after her brother, King Pygmalion, murdered her husband and seized his fortune. She gathered loyal followers, fled to North Africa, founded Carthage, and became Queen Elisa, nicknamed Dido. Carthage emerged as a dominant naval power in the Mediterranean. Carthaginian settlers established trading posts along the North African coast. One of those trading posts was Ixum. Linguistic and geographic evidence suggest that Ixum was the ancient precursor to today's Qasbah of Algiers. While Carthage controlled coastal North Africa, Amazigh kingdoms emerged inland: Mauritania, Numidia West, and Numidia East. As the conflict between Rome and Carthage intensified, alliances began to shift, and Carthaginian noblewoman Sophonisba became a pawn in a power struggle between powerful men. King Syphax of West Numidia was aligned with Rome. King Massinissa of East Numidia was aligned with Carthage and allegedly engaged to Sophonisba, daughter of Hasdrubal, a Carthaginian general and statesman. Carthage decided that Syphax would be a stronger ally against Rome than Massinissa, and ordered that Sophonisba marry Syphax instead of Massinissa. Massinissa felt betrayed by Carthage and aligned himself with Rome, while Syphax shifted his alliance from Rome to Carthage after he married Sophonisba. With the backing of Rome, Massinissa defeated Syphax near Cirta. Syphax was sent to Rome as a captive and Massinissa promptly married Sophonisba. But Rome disapproved of the marriage and demanded that Sophonisba be sent to Rome as a captive. Sophonisba was educated, persuasive, and influential. Rome allegedly feared that she might turn Massinissa against Rome. Rather than be paraded as a trophy in a Roman victory procession, Sophonisba drank poison and ended her life the way she lived, a dignified, noble woman from Carthage. After the capture of Syphax, and with the backing of Rome, Massinissa ruled a unified Numidia for 55 years, the longest continuous reign associated with present-day Algeria. Carthage was no longer the naval power it once was, but its economic resurgence and repeated clashes with Rome's ally Massinissa made it a renewed concern for Rome. Rome obliterated Carthage by the conclusion of the Third Punic War and permanently ended the existence of Carthage as an independent power. A conflict between Rome and Numidian king Jugurtha was escalating. King Bacchus of Mauritania enticed Jugurtha into a mediation meeting with Roman envoy Sulla. When unsuspecting Jugurtha arrived with a small escort, Bacchus handed him over to Sulla in exchange for Rome's backing and the extension of Mauritania into western Numidia. Bacchus was the father-in-law of Jugurtha. Rome was in the midst of a civil war, divided between Julius Caesar and Pompey's faction. Caesar had already begun to seize Numidian territory and diminish its autonomy. A victory for Caesar would have directly threatened the existence of both Juba and Numidia. So Juba sided with Pompey at the epic Battle of Thapsus. Caesar won decisively despite the towering elephants in the ranks of his enemies. Juba committed suicide to avoid being paraded like a trophy in the streets of Rome. His son Juba II, orphaned as a toddler, was taken to Rome as a captive and paraded in Julius Caesar's triumph procession. After the assassination of Julius Caesar, the power struggle shifted to his successors. Octavian, his heir and adopted son, and Mark Antony, his trusted general. Cleopatra of Egypt, Caesar's ally and mother of his son, had to choose a side. She chose to align with Mark Antony, who governed Rome's eastern provinces. Cleopatra's decision was both strategic and personal. Antony offered the military power necessary to safeguard Egypt's autonomy, and their political partnership quickly evolved into a romantic relationship. Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra at the epic Battle of Actium. The following year, Octavian invaded Alexandria. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, watched the collapse of 3,000 years of pharaonic dynasties. At that apocalyptic moment, she could not have foreseen that her daughter Cleopatra Selene would carry the pharaonic legacy to North Africa and become an Algerian queen. Cleopatra and Mark Antony committed suicide after the fall of Alexandria. Their orphaned young daughter, Cleopatra Selene, was taken to Rome to be raised in the household of Octavian, where another royal orphan from another war and another suicide was completing his Roman training, soon to become king of the land taken from his father by Julius Caesar and renamed Africa Nova. Octavian restored Numidia as a client kingdom and appointed young Juba II as king of Numidia. Octavian was declared Emperor Caesar Augustus by the Senate, making him the very first Roman emperor and transforming the Republic into the Roman Empire. Caesar Augustus arranged the marriage of Juba II and Cleopatra Selene, appointing them king and queen of Mauritania. Numidia ceased to exist and became part of the Roman province of Africa Proconsularis. Juba II and Cleopatra Selene established their court at Yol, a Phoenician coastal town in today's Seychelles, Algeria. They renamed it Caesarea, honoring Caesar Augustus and signaling their loyalty to Rome. Juba II and Cleopatra Selene invested heavily in architecture, libraries, art, and urban development. During their reign, Mauritania enjoyed its golden age, an era of peace, prosperity, and cultural brilliance where Amazigh, Punic, Hellenistic, Egyptian, and Roman influences intertwined. Today, the city of Seychelles is filled with remnants of that golden age. The king and queen ruled Mauritania together for 30 years. After the passing of Cleopatra Selene, Juba II ruled for another 18 years. The royal mausoleum of Mauritania is located 30 miles, as the crow flies, west of the Qasbah of Algiers. The remains of Juba II and Cleopatra Selene were never found. The mausoleum is said to have been looted in antiquity. Ptolemy, son of Juba II and Cleopatra Selene, succeeded his parents and ruled Mauritania for another 17 years. He continued his parents' work of cultural integration, peace, stability, and economic development. One day, at the peak of his power, Ptolemy of Mauritania was summoned to Rome by the ruling emperor. Like his parents, Ptolemy had always been loyal to Rome. He had no reason to suspect what was about to happen to him upon his arrival in Rome. Without cause or due process, Emperor Caligula ordered the execution of Ptolemy. Caligula, historians propose, harbored deep resentment towards Ptolemy because of Ptolemy's vast wealth, popularity, refinement, and his dual royal lineage, Amazigh royalty on his father's side and Ptolemaic Pharaonic Egyptian on his mother's side. The murder of Ptolemy ended an era of relative Amazigh autonomy and ushered in centuries of provincial Roman rule. Under Roman rule, Iqsam was Latinized into Icosium. Today, the Qasbah of Algiers stands on the ruins of Icosium. Rome split into West and East empires. North Africa was part of the West Roman Empire, which was experiencing internal conflicts. The Vandals, seizing the opportunity presented by Western Rome disunity and weakening, sailed 80,000 warriors and their families across the Strait of Gibraltar, quickly occupying the most accessible and wealthiest provinces in North Africa. After the Romans destroyed Carthage in the Third Punic War, they rebuilt it as a Roman city. The Vandals, led by King Gaiseric, seized Carthage and made it their capital. From Carthage, the Vandal kingdom controlled the richest North African provinces, the Balearics, Sardinia, and Corsica. By seizing Rome's vital grain supply and revenue, the Vandals significantly accelerated the collapse of the West Roman Empire and contributed to Europe's gradual descent into the Middle Ages. The Byzantines Rome's eastern cousins, defeated the Vandals, invaded North Africa, and reconquered what they viewed as former Roman colonial land. Amazigh tribes rebelled frequently against Byzantine rule, prompting the Byzantines to fortify cities across North Africa. In ancient Tevest, present-day Tbissa, wrapped around the Arch of Caracalla, the Walls of Solomon attest to the contentious relations between the Byzantine rulers and the local Amazigh populations. The Byzantines were defeated by the Arabs, and thus began the rule of the Arab caliphates. For more than 6 centuries, the Arabs were instrumental in preserving, advancing, and disseminating knowledge at scale. Their intellectual legacy laid the groundwork for Europe's transition from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. Arabic-speaking scholars translated Greek, Syriac, Persian, and Indian works, but they didn't just translate. They systematized algebra, advanced computational algorithms, built hospitals with specialized wards, and introduced licensing to regulate medical practice. Paper, much cheaper than parchment, was invented in China, but it was the Arabs who industrialized and scaled its production, massively accelerating the movement of knowledge from Al-Andalus to the doorsteps of China and India. The Arabs ushered in a golden age of books, science, technology, law, and art. Through Al-Andalus, Sicily, and translation centers like Toledo, Arab breakthroughs and know-how fueled Europe's scholastic revival and helped usher in the European Renaissance. In North Africa, the Arabs brought a powerful unifying force, Islam, a shared faith that transcended lineage and tribe. For the first time, rival Amazigh clans found common ground not through blood or alliance, but through belief. A new collective identity was taking shape, rooted in faith, language, shared customs, and shared purpose. In fact, the conquest of Iberia by the Arab Umayyad was spearheaded by an Amazigh commander, Tariq ibn Ziyad, who led an army of about 7,000, mostly Amazigh troops, across the Mediterranean. Upon their arrival on Spanish soil, they established a military base at a large rock formation. The site was later named Jebel Tariq, or Tariq's Mountain. Jebel Tariq became Gibraltar, the strait that still today carries the name of the Amazigh commander. At the time of the Arab Fatimid, Icosium was an abandoned city in ruins. Recognizing the strategic importance of the site's sheltered harbor and adjacent hill, Bulughyn ibn Ziri, a local Amazigh governor on behalf of the Fatimid, decided to build a city on the remnants of Icosium. The city was named El Jazair, the islands in Arabic. Centuries later, El Jazair would become the Qasbah of Algiers. Algiers and Algeria would share the same name, El Jazair, a name born in the Qasbah, on the ruins of Icosium, in the cradle of the nation. For centuries, Arab-led caliphates controlled the key middle stretches of the Silk Road and the spice routes. The global trade brought significant wealth into Arab treasuries, helping to pay for the libraries, research centers, and hospitals of the Arab Golden Age. While the caliphates were splintering into rival states, other powers were consolidating, innovating, and emerging. The Arab Golden Age crumbled under the weight of civil wars, crusades, and the Mongol ransacking of Baghdad, the Arabs' greatest intellectual center. 2 centuries later, another major setback came from the sea. Portuguese, Dutch, and English fleets established new trade routes around Africa, diverted the most lucrative commerce away from the Arab trade hubs, and gradually dominated long-distance sea trade. As internal strife and dogmatism supplanted unity and intellectual freedom, the Arab civilization faded into obscurity, bringing to an end one of history's most luminous eras. As the Arabs gradually lost their hold on the Maghreb, powerful Amazigh-led Islamic dynasties emerged in their place, reasserting indigenous North African control and political autonomy over much of the region. During the Almohad period, Abd al-Mumin ibn Ali shifted 2 major paradigms in North African governance. He was the first Amazigh Khalif outside the traditional Arab Quraysh line. Additionally, his reign established an unprecedented single centralized government over virtually the entire Maghreb, a degree of regional unity that has seldom, if ever, been replicated. A Maghreb Union today would cover a land area roughly 40% larger than that of the European Union, and surpass the EU in key strategic resource categories, particularly oil, natural gas, phosphate, iron ore, and exceptional solar energy potential. But Abd al-Mumin's vision of Maghreb unity only lasted roughly 70 years. After his death, old tribal and regional loyalties resurfaced, succession struggles weakened the center, opening the way for future foreign occupations. Spain had previously captured various North African coastal cities, exacting substantial payments from the local rulers. 3 of those cities remain under Spanish control still today. Off the El Jazair harbor, the Spanish Peñon fortress was casting a growing threat of a full-scale invasion of the city. Selim Toumi, the local ruler of Aljazair, invited the corsair Arouj Barbarossa and his brother Khaireddin to help drive the Spaniards from the Peñon and prevent an invasion of Aljazair. Arouj failed to retake the Peñon, blaming Selim of conspiring with Spain. Arouj ordered the assassination of Selim, and the Barbarossa brothers seized control of Aljazair. Arouj was killed a couple of years later in a battle against Spain near Tlemcen. Recognizing the difficulty of holding power alone, Khaireddin formally placed Aljazair under the protection of Ottoman Sultan Selim I, who granted him an elite military corps of 2,000 Janissaries and named him Beyler Bey, the Bey of Beys of Ottoman North Africa. Selim I passed away and was succeeded by his son, Suleiman the Magnificent. As Suleiman the Magnificent plunged into war with Spain for control of Europe and the Mediterranean, he armed Khaireddin Barbarossa with heavy artillery and reinforced the 2,000 Janissary Corps. Khaireddin destroyed the Peñon fortress and reused its stones to build the seawall that still underpins the Algiers harbor today. A few decades later, a fortress named Al-Qasba, the Citadel, was built on the heights overlooking Aljazair. Nestled between the seawall and the citadel, the city became known as Aljazair al-Mahrusa, Aljazair the well-guarded. The house where we're going? Al-Mahrusa. A century or so went by, and the local Ottoman rulers of Algeria decided to become autonomous from the Ottoman Sultan in Istanbul. Sultan-appointed pashas were replaced by locally elected deys. The deys were elected by the aghas, commanders of the Janissary Corps, the elite military backbone of Ottoman Algeria. The pasha's role became largely ceremonial. The deys no longer paid tribute to the Ottoman Sultan, but they received no protection either. Their autonomy came at a price: vulnerability to foreign invasion. France would capitalize on that vulnerability less than 2 centuries later. Throughout the late 1790s and the subsequent Napoleonic Wars, France was heavily dependent on mass quantities of Algerian grain to sustain its cities and military forces. Following Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, France's unpaid grain bills turned into a massive state debt to Algiers. Under the increasingly unpopular King Charles X, these economic hardships worsened, thereby intensifying political opposition and public unrest. Charles X needed an easy victory to distract the public and restore the prestige lost after Waterloo. Algiers, an Ottoman province in visible decline, looked like an easy target. But to legitimize France's aggression, Charles X needed a pretext. The pretext was handed to him by the Dey of Algiers himself, in the Palace of the Dey, seat of power of Ottoman Algeria. Dey Hussein, exasperated by decades of non-payment, struck the French consul with his fly whisk during an argument over the old grain debt. The government of Charles X seized on the diplomatic incident as the perfect pretext to inflame opinion at home and justify the 1830 invasion of Algiers. After the fall of Algiers, France tried to turn a coastal foothold into a full conquest of Algeria, but it met a formidable counterstate. In 1832, Emir Abdelkader unified scattered Algerian tribes, built an army, an administration, and a judicial system. After years of hard fighting against a significantly stronger invading force, Abdelkader forced Paris to negotiate. On May 30th, 1837, at Rajgun, near the mouth of the Tafna River, France signed the Treaty of Tafna, recognizing Abdelkader's authority over much of Algeria's interior, while France kept control of key coastal ports. Bouloughine ibn Ziri founded Aljazair. Emir Abdelkader laid the foundations of modern Algeria. In Paris, many officials soon resented the concessions France made by recognizing Emir Abdelkader's authority over much of the interior. In October 1839, French troops marched through the Iron Gates corridor linking Algiers to Constantine, an operation Abdelkader denounced as a breach of the treaty, and war resumed soon after. France then shifted from limited occupation to total conquest. In December 1840, it appointed General Bugeaud, who adopted scorched earth razzias, burning crops and villages, seizing livestock, and uprooting entire communities, a strategy aimed explicitly at cutting off freedom fighters from their local community support. Scorched earth razzias were quickly followed by a series of laws aimed at systematically dispossessing Algerians of their rightful land and permanently crushing Abdelkader's vision of a sovereign Algeria. On May 8, 1945, as France and the Allies celebrated liberation from Nazi Germany, Algerian nationalist demonstrations in Stif, Guelma, and Kharrata were crushed and followed by weeks of reprisals. The Algerian death toll varies widely from several thousands to as high as 45,000. This turning point collective trauma convinced Algerians that peaceful negotiations with France were a waste of time. 100 years after Bugeaud's scorched earth razzias, it was scorched earth all over again. By 1954, 75% of Algeria's cropland was controlled by an 11% French settler minority. The illiteracy rate among Algerians was 90%. fed up with injustice, land sequestrations, brutal repression, poverty, unemployment, and hopelessness, Algerians unleashed on France the wrath of their outrage, and the floodgates of war swung wide open. Algeria's War of Independence broke out on November 1st, 1954. For nearly 2 years after November 1954, the war was fought mostly in rural areas and was largely overlooked abroad. Then the Battle of Algiers erupted from the heart of the Qasbah in late 1956. Torture and extrajudicial executions of Algerian militants caused international outrage, increased media coverage, and support for the Algerian cause. The Qasbah of Algiers, founded a millennium earlier by Bouloughine ibn Ziri, was once again central to the emergence of the Algerian nation. Algeria became a sovereign nation on July 5, 1962. I was 7 years old, and I had the privilege to witness the birth of a nation in the streets where I grew up. And that was the story of the land and the resilient people I come from and will always be a part of.